And we are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Lopes Goes Last Podcast channel. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share this video if you like what you see so we can help the podcast grow. And also, please follow me on Twitter at Lopes Goes Last and on Facebook at Lopes Goes Last Podcast. It has been a really fun last couple of weeks. I know last week I did not upload anything, and it was just because life got super duper crazy. I did record an interview with Chase Burke and Ryan Bruce last week, but unfortunately due to technical issues I could not get that video up. For some reason it did not record the actual video of it. The audio was fine, but the video was not. So unfortunately that's pretty useless given the circumstances. So obviously couldn't upload that. And then after that, things just got kind of hectic. I was not able to record last week. But I think it's perfect timing right now because obviously all of the conference semifinal games for the NBA have concluded as of yesterday, which is, of course, May 15th. Today is May 16th is when I'm recording this. So all the conference semifinal games have concluded, which means that we now for sure have the matchups for the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, which of course will be the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference, and the Golden State Warriors and Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals. Crazy stuff going on in the NBA, and I cannot wait to do a deep dive into it with you guys right now, so let's get into it. I want to start out with kind of the least exciting one, right? Kind of the one that made the most sense out of every series. I think the one that, maybe other than what the Phoenix and Dallas series should have been, at least out of the ones that were remaining. The ones that, it made the most sense, which would be, of course, the Miami Heat defeating the Philadelphia 76ers in 6 games. I really didn't give the 76ers much of a chance, especially after Joel Embiid got hurt. I believe the last time I recorded something on the matter was before Game 3, before they had gone back to Philly. And I thought that, man, with Joel Embiid hurt and everything like that, it's not going to be good. But the 76ers and, of course, Joel Embiid put up one heck of a fight despite being undermanned and, of course, just not as talented of a unit as the Miami Heat, or at least, they didn't play like they were the most talented team. Obviously, when you have Joel Embiid on your team, you're probably going to have the best player on the floor versus almost anybody that you're going to play, save for a few teams. And then, obviously, James Harden, in his prime, is a fantastic player. But unfortunately, for the 76ers, he just does not appear to be the same kind of player that he used to be. So, quite frankly, they just were not the most talented team because James Harden did not play well for the majority of the series. He had a good Game 4, but other than that, he really did not perform up to snuff for the 76ers, basically for the whole season. I mean, they traded for him for a reason. It's because they thought that he'd be a good fit alongside Joel Embiid, and he really just didn't play well. I know in the closeout game in Game 6, he only took 2 shots in the entire second half. And it just was, when you're James Harden taking 2 shots in the entire second half, that's not even a performance issue. That is a confidence issue. And something has gone wrong with James Harden to the point where he really just isn't the same player that he was, which is a shame because James Harden is one of those players that has been great for a very long time, but has not won a championship. And, in his prime is either coming to an end or it already has ended. And it seems like it already has ended. But even guys that are, at the back end of their prime, they have a good shot to win an NBA championship should they get in the right situation. And James Harden just, there just doesn't seem to be a quote-unquote right situation for him at the moment. And it's really unfortunate. And it's really unfortunate for Joel Embiid because, Joel Embiid has gone from lackluster teammate to lackluster teammate to lackluster teammate. And, these guys, they haven't been able to get out of the Eastern semifinals at any point during Joel Embiid's run. Although I think maybe their series against the Raptors, Kawhi and the Raptors, that might have been the conference finals. I can't remember, but nonetheless, either way, they haven't been successful. That's been my point. Is they've kind of stagnated over the last 3 or 4 years in the postseason, and they haven't really improved. And despite the fact that Joel Embiid has improved, of course, in his game, before it was him staying healthy, and then it was him being on the court. But could he play as many minutes as he needs to because he gets winded very quickly? And then it was, okay, he's not going to get winded very quickly, but now he's just a post player. He needs to work on that perimeter game. And now he's turned into a bona fide MVP candidate to where, again, I've said this on the channel before, he had my vote. If I had to vote for MVP, I would have voted for Joel Embiid. Again, no disrespect to Nikola Jokic. Of course, he deserves another MVP this year. He played out of his mind, and he really carried that team with not a lot of talent around him because Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray were injured. But at the same time, I just think it should have gone to Joel Embiid. I think Joel Embiid played absolutely lights out this year on both ends of the floor. But nonetheless, I do feel bad for Joel. The guy went out there with multiple injuries. He might require multiple surgeries, although he and the team seem to think that his face will not require surgery, which is a good thing. But of course, you never really know at this point. He definitely is going to need surgery on his hand. But again, multiple injuries that guy fought through. And that team, he put them on his back. He put them on his back for the majority of the season, and he played great. And I do feel bad at the fact that he didn't have a lot of help. Really, I mean, Tyrese Maxey's a good player, but Tyrese Maxey is not enough. And James Harden, quite frankly, just again didn't play like James Harden is capable of playing. So, what happens to the 76ers now? I don't know. It's going to be tough because, they seem to want James Harden back. And, maybe James Harden in a full season with the 76ers right now, maybe that changes things. Who knows? But I, quite frankly, believe that it's not going to change anything. I think James Harden at this point is well past his prime. And, it really is sad because I think that James Harden, at least talent-wise, is a Hall of Famer. But, you can argue credentials and you can argue, stepping up during postseason play or not stepping up during postseason play. And there's plenty of arguments against him being a Hall of Famer. I still personally think he should be a Hall of Famer someday just because of his absolute dominance on the offensive end for a period of time. But nonetheless, maybe not. I think that, I've always said in the past, if Tracy McGrady, and again, no disrespect to Tracy McGrady, he's a phenomenal player, but if Tracy McGrady could get into the Hall of Fame with absolutely no credentials other than being an all-star, no championships, no MVPs, no any of that, if he can get into the Hall of Fame, then James Harden should be able to get into the Hall of Fame because obviously he's an MVP, he's led the league in scoring multiple times, 10-time, 11-time All-Star, or however many times it's been at this point. He's a fantastic player. And he hasn't had a lot of postseason success. Although, I think people forget that, they were one absolutely catastrophic shooting performance away from going to the finals back in 2019. But it just didn't happen, with Chris Paul. It just didn't happen. Because, again, probably the most historically poor shooting performance by a team in NBA history. Especially when you factor in how good the Houston Rockets were at that time with shooting threes. So again, the question as it pertains to what happens with the 76ers now, they're going to be cap-strapped for sure, especially if James Harden opts into his player option, which I think that he probably will. One, because Philadelphia is going to be a contender, of course, with Tyrese Maxey, having another year under his belt, having another offseason to improve. Joel Embiid having, another year in his prime in the NBA. And then, of course, you factor in the money. If James Harden were to opt out, he'll be probably taking a significant pay cut from the $47 million player option that he has right now. And he might not even end up going to a better team because who is going to pay James Harden that much money as a contender, knowing that James Harden, at least over the last few years, has not necessarily helped teams get a championship, although, you can't really, I don't necessarily blame last year for the Brooklyn Nets on James Harden, of course, but nonetheless, I don't really know what you do if you're the 76ers at this point, because, you've got a solid, core of Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and then I guess James Harden. But beyond that, I mean, you've got to be able to get some talent around. And I think Seth Curry was your perfect bet, but obviously he was shipped off in order to get James Harden. Seth Curry did a lot for that 76ers team, and I know that the guys on the 76ers would say the same thing. Andre Drummond was great in terms of spelling Joel Embiid for a time, especially on the defensive end and rebounding. But, of course, he's not there anymore. So, what do you do if you're the 76ers? You don't really have a lot of talent outside those three guys. Matisse Thybulle is a fantastic defender, but he can't really play offense all that much. It just and quite frankly, there's not a lot of other people that are worth even mentioning in terms of guys that might be able to help you on a regular basis on that team. So, other than Tobias Harris, of course, but Tobias Harris is another guy that's ridiculously overpaid for what he gives you. He's going to give you about 20 points a night, and that's great. But $35 million a year should not be given to somebody who's going to be giving you 20 points a night. We're not paying Jaylen Brown $20 million or $35 million a year, and he's scoring about 22 to 25 points a night. So, and I would much rather have Jaylen Brown than Tobias Harris, and I think anybody, maybe other than a diehard 76er fan that is, kind of one of those people that's just kind of like, no, all my guys are my guys. And, that's fair. That's fine. Other than that guy, I think anybody would rather have Jaylen Brown right now than Tobias Harris. And so, I don't know. I just don't think you have enough talent right now in Philadelphia consistently to get farther than what you have. You're going to have to surround your team with shooting. You're going to have to try and get some more 3-and-D guys. And maybe you can find somebody that's worth it in the draft. 76ers have been fairly decent at drafting over the last few years, other than, of course, Markelle Fultz, but we won't get into that. That's a whole nother video right there. But nonetheless, moving on to the Miami Heat, of course, the other team in this equation, they took care of business. Of course, they were the number one seed. They were the favorite, 76ers, gave them a little bit of a run in games 3 and 4, but then obviously the Heat, strapped up, took care of business, and, they're moving on to the East Conference Finals again, for the second time in 3 years. Now, we can all talk about the bubble and how weird it was and everything. And, a lot of people are of the opinion that the bubble doesn't really necessarily count because it was such a weird season, which I think is a little bit disrespectful. Again, we talked about this in a couple of the interviews that I've done is, people saying that, the Dodgers World Series run in the COVID year because they only played 60 games doesn't count. And I think, at the end of the day, a World Series is a World Series, and, it's better to win one in the COVID year than not win any at all, of course. But, nonetheless, the Heat, they're back where they were 2 years ago. Last year was a very strange year for the Heat. They just underperformed. But this year, they made a concerted effort to upgrade. They exchanged Goran Dragic for Kyle Lowry, essentially. They were able to kind of get Max Strus up to par, and he's a very, very good player for them. They signed Victor Oladipo. Obviously, Bam Adebayo, a young stud of a center, has another year to get better. You still have Jimmy Butler, of course. Duncan Robinson. He's actually kind of fallen out of the rotation, which is very interesting to me. A guy that's been starting for them for the last couple of years over Tyler Hero most of the time. Now barely even starts at this point. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Tyler Hero, who won Sixth Man of the Year this year, he really stepped up on the scoring end. They're a great defensive team. They're back where they, quite frankly, belong. They are a very, very good team. They're one of the best teams in the East. Obviously, this year they were the best team in the East record-wise. So, certainly the Heat are back where they should be, at least in their minds, of course. They're going to want to go out and they're going to want to take care of business against the Celtics. But I will say I'm not sure they're going to be able to. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But back to the Heat, Kyle Lowry's already been ruled out for Game 1. And obviously the Heat have played without Kyle Lowry for most of this postseason, and it has not really hurt them that much. I really thought that it would hurt them against the 76ers because, you've got two great scoring guards in Tyrese Maxey and James Harden, and it really didn't affect them. I found that very interesting, of course, because, how could it not affect that? But obviously, Victor Oladipo and I think, is it Garrison Matthews? Whoever their other guard is, I'm going to check that just to make sure that I have the correct name there. Yeah, I think it's Garrison Matthews. I think that is who is the other guard here. Forgive me for... It is not Garrison Matthews. See, it was Gabe Vincent. I apologize for getting that wrong. I'm glad I checked. But nonetheless, Gabe Vincent and the other guys that have stepped up in his absence have really, really been great. And I do apologize for not, it's hard to memorize the roster for every single team, especially when, it's a young guy. He's 25 years old. I never heard of him. Sorry. But nonetheless, they really have stepped up. The other guards have stepped up, especially Victor Oladipo. He's really out of the rotation for most of the season, and now he's playing big minutes for them. He's getting about 20 minutes a night or more if he does start. He has started a couple times for the Heat. So, they've got a deep team. Even without Kyle Lowry, they still have a reasonably deep team, especially at the guard spot. You still got Duncan Robinson. You still got Tyler Hero. You still got... Gabe Vincent. Obviously, you got Victor Oladipo. You've got some really good guards, and they can all score, and they can all, other than maybe Duncan Robinson, they can all defend a little bit. Even Tyler Hero, who, he isn't the best defender in the world. He's slightly below average, but he's not completely lost out there, obviously. So, it's going to be definitely an interesting series, the Heat and the Celtics, because they're so similar. But, we'll see. We'll see kind of how it goes. Obviously, the points probably come from different places on both teams. Obviously, the Celtics are a bit more top-heavy, I would say, than the Miami Heat, who kind of spread the scoring out between 3, 4, even 5 guys. Whereas the Celtics rely very, very heavily on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown with some help from other guys depending on the night. Sometimes it's Al Horford, like we saw in Game 4. Sometimes it's Grant Williams, like we saw in Game 7, which, again, I'll get to later. Sometimes it's Marcus Smart, like we saw in Game 6. Sometimes it's Peyton Pritchard. You just never know the other guys that are going to step up if you're the Celtics, which I think is a good and a bad thing because, while, you never really know who's going to beat you, you also don't know who's going to beat you, which means somebody might just not beat you. Like, you're not relying on the same bunch of guys to score for you like you're the Heat, where you basically have Jimmy Butler, you've got Bam, and you got Tyler Hero, and anybody else that can contribute in any sort of way on the offensive end is where you're going to go with that. Max Strus can deliver sometimes. He's performed well at certain points. Obviously, when Duncan Robinson plays, he's a great shooter. Victor Oladipo, when he's played, and when he's been given some free run to run the offense, he's been playing well on the offensive end as well sometimes. So, you're relying on a whole bunch more guys if you're the Miami Heat, which I think is a good thing for the Heat. So, again, would I be surprised if the Heat won the Eastern Conference Finals? Absolutely not. They are a fantastic team, but I do think this year is going to go a little bit differently. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later. Moving on to another series that, at least in my mind, had a pretty predictable conclusion. I think that a lot of other people kind of really fell in love with that Ja Morant game in Game 2 where, he dropped 47, 10, and 8 or whatever it was. And of course I'm talking about the Warriors and the Grizzlies. The Warriors taking care of business in 6 games. There was a lot of talk that the Warriors might lose this series if they don't win Game 6, and I think that's actually a fair argument considering, if the Grizzlies were able to walk into to Golden State's house and, take it to them and beat them, they're going to have all the momentum going into Game 7. It was a very interesting argument for sure, but I never really put too much stock in it. I knew that the Warriors were going to end up pulling it out. They're just too good, and the Memphis Grizzlies, as good as they were in the regular season, they just aren't ready right now. And I will say this, I have said on this channel multiple times that the Grizzlies are better without Ja. That's just they play better without Ja for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because Tyus Jones is so underrated, the guy who starts for him in his place. I don't know. I know that there's obviously a little bit more ball movement, a little bit more spreading around the offense and spreading around the love. I know Jaren Jackson kind of gets a little bit more free reign when Ja's not playing, but nonetheless, Dylan Brooks really balled out in Game 6. It was really, really fun. The Warriors, it was a very close game until the very, very end when the Warriors started to pull away in the fourth quarter. But, really, really fun to watch. Klay Thompson balled out too. That was really nice to see because I feel like he hasn't really had a lot of Klay Thompson-style games since coming back from injury. It seems like he's struggled a lot more than he's played well. So it was really, really nice to see him hitting shots, hitting three-pointers, jumpers early and often like he was in Game 6. At least from now. If the Celtics and Warriors end up making the finals, then, I'm not going to want Klay Thompson to have any Klay Thompson-style games, but for now, it is nice to see. So, but anyways, back to the Grizzlies, they do play a little bit better without Ja Morant, at least in my mind. I think they were something like 23-7 or 22-7 or something like that without Ja Morant this year. I mean, that speaks for itself. At that point, you're on pace to win 65 games, which is better than what they did this year, without Ja Morant. So, it's just crazy to think about that, but nonetheless, it's a very, very interesting kind of thing to think about with, Ja Morant being injured, because I honestly thought, I got a little worried, because I was like, oh no, the Grizzlies might make the Western Conference Finals because their best player is injured. Because, again, no word of a lie, I have said on this channel multiple times that the Grizzlies are better without Ja. And as soon as he went down, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then, of course, the game he got hurt, the Grizzlies still almost won that game. So, it's one of those things where you sit there and go, oh no, not my worst nightmare, because I had predicted the Warriors were going to very easily handle the Grizzlies. And, of course, they did not easily handle the Grizzlies, and I think in large part it was because Ja Morant got injured, and, of course, Gary Payton II, I should say, getting injured, and he was really that guy that was kind of put in charge of stopping Ja Morant, or at least slowing him down enough. He was definitely their kind of defensive heartbeat at the guard position. So, now what do you do if you are the Warriors? Because now you've got to play Luka Doncic, and quite frankly, I don't know who the heck's going to chase around Luka without Gary Payton, because Gary Payton, they've already said he's a long shot to play in the Western Conference Finals because he's got that broken arm. So, I don't know who's going to chase him around, because Klay Thompson's not the same defender he once was, because I would have said Klay Thompson, but he's just not the same after his injuries. And of course, he's not going to be exactly the same. He's a couple of years older. He's got some wear and tear on his legs. So, I get it. But who's going to chase him around? Is it going to be Draymond Green? And if that's the case, then, who's going to stop the rest of the team? You don't really have, are you going to put Curry on Jalen Brunson? Or are you going to put Klay Thompson on Jalen Brunson? And if that's the case, then, what's going to happen with Spencer Dinwiddie when he comes off the bench? It's just going to be, the Dallas Mavericks are a problem matchup for the Warriors, for sure. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens with that. And back to the Grizzlies, what do you do if you're the Grizzlies, right? I think that, obviously, regardless of my opinion of Ja Morant and them being better without him, at least in my mind, you're not going to get rid of Ja Morant. Of course, you can't do that. That would be insane and stupid. And I'm saying that, again, even though I think that they're better without Ja, because Ja is just so box office, and he is so young. I think he's still 21 or 22 years old. He's so young. He's got time to develop those skills of facilitating and of not being so much of a ball vacuum. And it's not to say that he can't rack up assists. Of course he can, but it's about the flow of the offense. Are you getting that ball out quickly, and are you making decisions very quickly on the drive and on the catch and shoot to get guys open? Are you passing up good shots to get great shots? What are you doing as a playmaker if you're Ja Morant? And I just haven't seen enough of that to say definitively that he can turn into that. Can he? Absolutely, for sure. But will he? I can't say that definitively. I wanted to make that clear, because I did kind of say, I don't think he can, and then I said he could. So, can he? Absolutely. Will he? Can't say that for sure. So, what do you do? I think that you definitely have to continue to build defensively around Ja, because he is very limited on the defensive end, and that's one of the reasons why they are better without him, at least in my mind, is because he is a bit of a liability on the defensive end. He's a lot like Curry in that way, and Curry has definitely improved team defensive wise. He really fits that defensive scheme out in Golden State, and they've really catered that to him. And I think Memphis has to kind of do the same thing for Ja. Now, Ja is a little bit more athletic on the defensive end than Curry, but he's just so undersized. It's just not going to work out against the vast majority of point guards, especially in today's day and age when, you've got guys that, are bigger and sturdier at the point guard's position, especially in these playoffs, like Luka. He's big, he's sturdy, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he will post you up and he will tear you apart at the point guard position. Looking at the Eastern Conference, obviously Kyle Lowry is not the biggest guy in the world, so that might not necessarily be the worst option for Ja. But then for Ja, and then Marcus Smart is again a big sturdy point guard. So that's just a few examples of even just the guys that are left in the playoffs right now. And then you even look at the Milwaukee Bucks, who we'll get into later, of course. Drew Holiday's another big, strong point guard that just would give Ja Morant problems. So I think that you have to kind of build defensively around Ja, and you need to build shooting-wise around Ja 100%. And, I think a guy like Brandon Clark, guys like Dylan Brooks, these guys can still develop. I think that they still have some, obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr. It's a very young team. I think people forget that. The Memphis Grizzlies will improve, and they will be back. Barring any kind of catastrophe, of course, they will be back. They'll get better. And I think Ja's got to really, get back to, kind of figuring out, what kind of player he wants to be. He can't just be a scorer. Because if you're just a scorer, you're going to be De'Aaron Fox. You're going to be a guy that goes out there and gets 25 points a night, but it's not going to matter to winning. So, I don't know. I don't really know what necessarily moves you make. I think Bruce Brown is a really good fit out there in Memphis. I think he would really, really help you defensive-wise, especially at the guard position. Now, he might price himself out. I feel like Bruce Brown, given his defensive prowess and how well he performed in the playoffs other than the last couple of games, I think he's probably going to end up pricing himself out to where the Grizzlies might not want to spend that money on Bruce Brown, especially since they already have some good guards behind Ja Morant. But I think that, you've got to build more around Ja. You got to get some more shooting. You got to get some more defense around him. And I think having a big veteran presence out in Memphis would really help, especially defensively. I think that Brook Lopez would be a great fit for them in free agency. Maybe even a Jay Crowder. A guy like that could just go in there and be that wily veteran that's going to give you good defensive minutes. Brook Lopez isn't the most special player in the world, but he showed in the Celtics series that on the defensive end, he can be a problem at times. And he's just a guy that has been there and done that. He knows he knows how to win. He knows what to do. So, guys like that would be a good fit in Memphis, at least in my opinion, but we will see how that goes. And moving on to the Warriors, I did talk about them a little bit. They have so many great players on that team right now. Obviously, you've got the big three, from the nightmare of Christmas past, right, with Curry, Thompson, and Green. And then you add Jordan Poole into the mix, who's really broken out this year. I did not see that kind of breakout coming from Jordan Poole this year, but he's really, really performed well. And then you add in Andrew Wiggins. You add in, a guy like Otto Porter. So, there's guys all over that team that just have so much talent. And, especially, it's crazy to think, where would they be if James Wiseman? People forget that James Wiseman is even on that team. What if James Wiseman was still there, the number 2 overall pick a couple years ago? So it's just very interesting to see how that team has grown over the last 2 seasons. And, last 2 seasons, they've really just been mediocre at best. So, it was a nice revenge series for the Golden State Warriors, obviously losing in the play-in tournament to the Memphis Grizzlies last year. So kind of a nice little revenge, and it's so crazy to see the 2 play-in teams last year now are the 2 and 3 seed up in the West. Really, really cool. Really, really awesome kind of bit of growth for both those teams. But nonetheless, the Warriors, they're my pick to go to the finals. I love Dallas, and I'm scared of Dallas. And again, we'll get into that in a little bit, but I can't bet against the Warriors. I've bet against the Warriors before, and they burned me every time. I'm not betting against them this time. Do I hope that they lose? No, honestly, I don't hope that they lose because I'm actually a little bit more scared of Dallas than I am of Golden State because, Golden State, yes, they have a lot of offensive juggernauts and talent, but defensively, they don't scare me at all. I mean, quite frankly, they just don't. They don't scare me defensively. I'm not scared of Klay Thompson defensively anymore. I'm definitely not scared of Curry. I'm not scared of Jordan Poole. Draymond Green's a good defender, but he is getting up there in age. And Kevon Looney, come on. No. Otto Porter's fine. Andrew Wiggins is a decent defender as well. He's pretty athletic, but they don't scare me like the Bucks or the Heat or the Mavericks scare me defensively. But, of course, they are amazing offensively. But for me, defense can cancel out offense. It can. It doesn't always, but it can. So I would rather have, a great defensive team in the playoffs than a great offensive team in the playoffs because you saw it with Brooklyn. They had no defense and all offense, and they went up against a team that didn't have no offense, but had a lot less offense than they did, and an incredible defense, and they got swept. So it just, a great defensive team is the majority of the time going to beat a great offensive team. So I'm much more scared of the Mavericks than I am of the Warriors. But again, that being said, I'm still picking the Warriors, and it's just because they've been there and done that. And Luka is a monster. He is a monster. And that guy scares me to death. They walked into Boston when Boston was at their peak in the regular season, and Spencer Dinwiddie called game. They scare me. They really, really do. But championship pedigree scares me a little bit more than the Dallas Mavericks. And that's why I was so scared of the Bucks. They've got championship pedigree. I said before, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later as well, but I said before Game 7 that if the game was close, the Celtics would lose. Because that's the difference in championship pedigree versus not championship pedigree. That's why the Celtics blew Game 5. It's because the game got close at the end, and the Celtics had not been in position to have championship pedigree, and the Bucks had. So they knew how to handle that situation, and the Celtics hadn't. Luckily for all Celtics fans, Game 7 was a blowout, and we didn't have to worry about it. But I said if the game was going to be close, the Celtics would lose. If they were going to win, they were going to have to blow Milwaukee out of the water, and they did. But anyways, I'll get into that more later, and I feel like I've said that quite a bit already, so I apologize for that. But nonetheless, I'm picking the Warriors to go to the finals. I do think that this series has a chance to go 7 games. But then, of course, higher seed gets home court. And I just think that that's going to be the difference, And also, yeah, the Mavericks have a great defense. And I'm really interested to see how it matches up because they did really, really good job defending Chris Paul, but Chris Paul is not Steph Curry. And obviously you got Devin Booker, who's a fantastic player and a fantastic shooter in his own right, but Devin Booker's not Steph Curry either. So, who's going to chase around Steph Curry? And, is it going to be Dorian Finney-Smith? Is it going to be Jalen Brunson? Is it going to be Luka Doncic? Because if it's Luka, if Luka has to chase around Curry, which I don't think that he will, I think he'll probably chase around Klay Thompson, it's going to be a problem. And even Jalen Brunson, he's a bit undersized. I don't think that Steph Curry should be scared of Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson's a good defender, but I wouldn't be scared of Jalen Brunson if I'm Steph Curry. Because again, Chris Paul is not Steph Curry. Chris Paul's 37. Chris Paul is a phenomenal player. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind, even without a championship, without MVPs. I don't care. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest point guards of all time, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. But he's 37. And he doesn't have the same game as Steph Curry. He's not going to shoot 45% from 3 if you let him. And he's certainly not going to chuck up 15 of them if you let him either. So I just think that the Warriors present a whole nother dynamic. And by the way, that's not even including Jordan Poole, who's really broke out this year. But again, defensively, the Mavs, I think they might have the tools to stand up to the Warriors. But I can't predict that right now. I can't just definitively say, absolutely, the Warriors are going to be stifled by the Mavericks defense. I have to see it. So I'm very interested to see how Game 1 goes, at Golden State, because quite frankly, if the Mavericks come out and play like they played in Phoenix in Game 7, it's going to be a problem. It is going to be a problem. And we'll get into that Game 7 between the Mavericks and the Suns right now, because I will move on at this point to, of course, the series between the Mavericks and the Suns. I said on this podcast I didn't give the Mavericks a chance, and of course I have eaten my words, and they did not taste good. Again, I think a part of it wasn't that I didn't think that the Mavericks could win. I was just kind of hoping that they wouldn't, because I'm very scared of the Mavericks, because they are so good defensively. They showed it. They just took the best team in the NBA this year. I mean, you can argue regular season versus playoffs, who's really the best team. Obviously, the record would have said that Brooklyn was like the 15th or 16th best team in the league this year. But, of course, they're not. Like, you could definitely argue regular season record doesn't, always show you how talented a team is. And I completely understand that. But they still won 64 games this year. They still almost won 70 games in the regular season. They beat everybody that they played almost. And yet, Dallas walked into their house and tore them apart. Absolutely tore them apart. And for those of you who did not see the game or have not heard anything about it, they tore them apart. I'm not kidding. Like, they meaning the Suns, were down by 30 points at halftime. They had scored 27 points at halftime. Luka Doncic had 27 points in the first half, which means that Luka Doncic had as many points as the Phoenix Suns in the first half. Crazy stuff. And Spencer Dinwiddie came off the bench and shot like 80% from the field and scored 30 points. Jalen Brunson had 22 points in just the second half. Like, they ran him off the court. And, the final score ended up only being a difference in like 32 or 33 points. It wasn't even that close. At one point, the Phoenix Suns were down by 46 points. 46 points in Phoenix. Like, how do you explain that to your fans? I don't think you can. I think that's the problem. And there's been a lot of talk about, the Mavericks. Give the Mavericks credit. They went out there and took care of business. I mean, no bones about it. No doubt about it. I mean, wow. They went out there and they said, I don't care. I don't care that we've lost by an average of 20 points in this building 3 straight games. I don't care. We're going to go out there and we're going to dominate. And they did. They dominated more in a Game 7 than I have ever seen any team dominate in a Game 7 in any sport. So, I mean, crazy, crazy game to see. I mean, I was floored watching that game. I was like, are you kidding me? Chris Paul and Devin Booker have 0 made field goals with 3 minutes left in the second quarter. They have no field goals at halftime. Devin Booker had like 3 points and Chris Paul had like 1 or 2, whatever it was at halftime. It was bonkers. Like, yeah, you could have picked the Mavericks to win and it would have made sense. I would have understood it, but not like that. I mean, anybody who thought that they saw that coming, they're just lying to you. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff, but like, what? How do you explain that to your fans? Again, give Dallas credit, but I mean, you can lose at home in a Game 7. I've seen it. I'm a Celtics fan. We lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers and only put up 79 points against LeBron in Game 7 because, you know how I can explain that? Because Terry Rozier went like 0 for 58 in the game or something, like 1 for 18, like whatever the heck it was. One of our best scorers and one of our most reliable scorers had a really, really bad game. It happens. Yeah. And we lost by 8. If he even had an average game, we win that game. So, there's your explanation. How do you explain losing by 30 at halftime and scoring How do you explain the Dallas Mavericks more than doubling your score at halftime? How do you explain that? Because that's not just on one person. That is on everybody. That is on Chris Paul. That is on Devin Booker. That is on Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges, unless I'm out of my mind, was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, unless I'm mistaken. He was one of the top 3 It was Marcus Smart, Rudy Gobert, and Mikal Bridges, unless I'm mistaken. And Mikal Bridges couldn't even stay in front of Luka at all. He couldn't guard Luka one iota last night. Now, granted, nobody could, but what happened? Mikal Bridges is supposed to be your guy that's supposed to go in there and slow down Luka, and he put up 35, 10, and 7, or 35, 10, and 4 in 3 quarters. Like, he would have probably had 45 or 50 points had he kept going, had it been a close game, the way he was playing. You know, like, it's just unbelievable, the collapse of the Phoenix Suns. I've never seen anything like it. You know, and there's been all these sun puns, right? The sun sets in Phoenix, or, you know, the sun don't shine in Phoenix. And, you know, as corny as they are, it's true. Like, you know, they didn't rise. The Phoenix did not rise out there in Arizona because they just performed horribly. I mean, you know, Chris Paul has a horrible reputation of blowing leads, and this did not help because they were up 2-0 in the series, and that's the 5th time that has happened to Chris Paul in his career. 2 more than any other player ever. So it does not help the narrative for Chris Paul. But Chris Paul was averaging 9 points a game over the last 5 games of the series. 9. I said a couple of months ago, I don't care how good Devin Booker is, Chris Paul is your most important player if you're the Phoenix Suns. And this series showed that perfectly. Without Chris Paul performing like Chris Paul, the Phoenix Suns go nowhere. Because guess what? We had prime Devin Booker in Phoenix for years, and they did nothing of note. It was only when Chris Paul went there that they started to succeed. Now, I'm not completely saying that Chris Paul was the entire reason of the turnaround. Devin Booker took a big step forward the last 2 years as a player, as a scorer, and as a defender. He really has stepped up. He's gotten a lot better. Because before, he was just kind of a pure shooter. Now he's much more of a complete player. But Chris Paul is most important. And when your best player, or you're not your best player, but your most important player goes out there and his stats get cut by a third for 5 games, that means you're going to lose 4 of them. And that's exactly what they did. They were up 2-0, and for the last 5 games of the series, Chris Paul averaged 9 points, 4 assists, and like 2 rebounds a night, despite averaging 22 points, 9 or 10 assists, and 5 or 6 rebounds a night before that. I mean, his stuff got slashed, and so did the Phoenix title hopes. I mean, it's not really super complicated. You know, I can't say most because when you lose by 40, it's not on one player. But most of this series collapse, I can say it's because of Chris Paul, because he just didn't show up. I mean, he turned 37 after game 2. And it was almost like somebody had a birthday party for him. They got the big 3-7 on the candles. He makes a wish. He blows it out. His kids come up to him and asked him, "Daddy, do you feel any different now that you've turned 37? And he kind of looked at his soul and went, yeah, I do. And then just stunk for the rest of the series. No, I don't know any other way to say it. He stunk for the rest of the series. And it hurts my heart because I want Chris Paul to win a championship so bad because he deserves it. I mean, he's been in the league for God knows how long, 16, 17 years, whatever it's been. You know, basically my entire life that I've paid attention to basketball, Chris Paul has been there. So he deserves to win one, but man, that window is closing fast. I mean, last year was probably his best chance, and you know, unfortunately in the finals, it was the 4th time that a team led by Chris Paul had blown a 2-0 series lead, and he did it in the finals, and the Milwaukee Bucks obviously won 4 straight. So, man, I feel terrible for Chris Paul, and I feel terrible for Phoenix fans because, I mean, you had to think that you were the best team in the league this year. Of course you did. I mean, you had the best record by far of anybody in the league. I get it. Like, that makes sense. Hey, we're the best team in the league. Just look at our record. Yep, makes a lot of sense. But I think what really let the Phoenix Suns down, other than Chris Paul, of course, is their style of play is just so not conducive to what the rest of the NBA is doing. You know, analytics has really changed the game of basketball, and people are, a lot of people are upset because there's so many threes taken, but it's just analytically better to take certain types of threes than it is to take twos, because especially corner threes, those are 22-foot jump shots that are worth more than other 22-foot jump shots. It just makes sense. If you move to the middle of the floor and you take a 22-foot jump shot, that's a two-pointer. That's not a good shot. But if you take a corner three and a 22-foot jump shot, that's a three-pointer. That's a great shot. Like, it makes a lot of sense. So, in today's NBA, you want to get to the rim, you want to get to the foul line, and you want to shoot corner threes. That's what you want to do. And the Phoenix Suns are bottom of the barrel with all of that. And, JJ Redick talks about this on his podcast. He goes really well in-depth, much more in-depth than I can. But it makes a lot of sense because the Phoenix Suns offense relies so heavily on Chris Paul creating offense and Devin Booker creating offense. And both those guys are so good at mid-range jumpers that a lot of their offense is just that. It's mid-range jumpers. Or it's DeAndre Ayton going at it in the post. And that's just not how the modern NBA works right now. And so you've got a team like the Mavericks that are just going to light it up from three and just get to the rim like crazy. It's only a matter of time before you end up losing like that. And, of course, that's exactly what happened to Phoenix. So what do you do if you're Phoenix? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, that Chris Paul contract looks a lot worse right now than it did 4 days ago. I mean, it really, really does. And especially a week and a half ago. Looks way worse now than it did a week and a half ago. Because now, Chris Paul's 37. He's on contract till he's 40. And he's not getting paid tiny amounts of money. He's making 30+ million. Are you going to be willing to pay a 39-year-old guard that doesn't have what he used to have, $30 million a year? And so was this year your window? That's my concern for Phoenix. I think this year might have been their window unless they do something to shake up that roster. And DeAndre Ayton's a free agent right now. He's restricted, so my guess is they're probably going to match it. But then now you've got 3 guys on max contracts, or at least on huge contracts. Who are you going to have to lose now? Because quite frankly, their team's not all that deep. You've got Mikal Bridges, other than the top 3 guys I mentioned in DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul. You got Mikal Bridges. You got, after that, who? Jay Crowder. It's not really all that deep of a team. So, and it's only going to get worse because now you're going to have to pay DeAndre Ayton a ton of money to keep him. Or, God forbid, you lose him because then you're really done. JaVale McGee's your starting center now, and as much as I love JaVale McGee, he's not DeAndre Ayton. And he's not going to be unless you've got unbelievable other talent around him, he's not going to be a starting center on a championship team anymore. He was a starting center on the Warriors and the Lakers because they were the Warriors and they were the Lakers, and it makes sense because they had all-stars at every other position. But not in Phoenix. You don't have that. So, I don't know what you do if you're Phoenix. I really have no idea. I quite frankly think their championship window is closed. And it's really, really sad because it really feels like 2008, 2009 all over again. Obviously those are 2 very different teams, but the Phoenix Suns window in the Steve Nash era was about open by that much. And then it was done. Just gone in a matter of a couple of years. And it feels like the exact same thing has just happened again. So we'll see what they do, but it's just really sad. And then moving on to the Mavericks, I talked about them earlier. They scare me. They are a phenomenal defensive team. Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, Jalen Brunson. You got your guys coming off the bench. Like, even without Tim Hardaway, that's a really, really good team, especially on the defensive end. And, I'm sure that they sit there and feel like, we can just focus on defense because, I've got a guy that's going to put up 35 a night in Luka Doncic. So it doesn't really matter. And then, with Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, if they can support Luka on the offensive end, yes, on the offensive end, then they're a really dangerous team. So we'll see how the Warriors kind of try and defend them. It's going to be a heck of a series. It's going to be a heck of a series. I think that if the Warriors went up against the Suns, I would pick the Warriors in 5 because I just don't think the Suns have enough talent, especially defensively, to handle the Warriors. But the Mavericks, that's a more difficult matchup if you're the Warriors. I have to look into kind of what the season series was between the Mavericks and the Warriors, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Mavericks won every game that they played against them. So, and I don't know what the answer is to that, but, man, it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out brawl. Both series are. They're going to just be unbelievable matchups. The Warriors have all the firepower in the world on offense, and the Mavericks, they just might have the tools to stop them on defense. So we will see how it goes, but my prediction, of course, I'm going to go Warriors in 7. I think it's going to go 7. But I think that, I keep wanting to say Oracle Arena. I don't think it's Oracle Arena anymore. They moved arenas not too long ago. But nonetheless, oh man. It's just going to be a crazy series. And again, I think it's going to go 7. But I think, being in Golden State for Game 7 is going to be all the difference. We saw it in Game 6 against the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies came out, had a big rally for like 3 quarters. They were hanging in there, and then it was done. Like, just Klay Thompson 3, Steph Curry 3, Klay Thompson 3, Steph Curry 3, and just it was over in a matter of seconds, because that's just the Golden State Warriors factor. Like, as soon as they get hot, it's over. And so I think that, if I'm going to take a team in a Game 7, as phenomenal as Luka Doncic and the Mavericks just played on the road in Game 7, if anybody thinks the Warriors are going to shrink like that, you're out of your mind. Because the Warriors do not shrink in Game 7s. I've seen it time and time and time again. 2019 or 2018, whatever it was, finals notwithstanding. They didn't shrink that game, by the way. They were just simply outplayed by greatness. I'm going to stick to that. But in every other Game 7 I've seen, the Warriors usually come out on top. Let's be honest with ourselves. And so I can't pick against them right now. But if the Mavericks do come out in Game 1 and just dominate in Golden State, I will change my answer very quickly. Because I would not be shocked if the Mavericks just destroyed the Warriors because of their defense. We will see, though. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Warriors are going to pull it out. But we will see what happens. And now, let's go, baby! Let's go, baby! Oh, goodness. Okay, so, Celtics Bucks, right? Obviously. So, I'm 24 years old. Last night, I felt roughly 73 years old. After watching this series, I'm worn out, and I was really angry at the fact that the Heat series with the Celtics is starting tomorrow. Like, it's starting on Tuesday, and I'm recording this on, of course, Monday the 16th. So, like, I'm very upset almost because I want to be able to breathe. I want to be able to comprehend and understand what happened in this series because it was such an unbelievable series, and it was just a microcosm of 2 team seasons rolled into one. It really was. And I think that it was almost like an exorcism of a demon for the Celtics. Because in years prior, this series would have been over in 6. They would have gotten killed in Game 6 in years past. And definitely in years past, they would have lost Game 7. For sure, they would have lost Game 7. Because, quite frankly, after watching the first quarter, I thought we were going to lose Game 7. I thought it was going to be the same old story. We were only down by 6? I think it was 26-20 or 24-20, something like that at the end of the first quarter. I was like, here we go again. We're going to get to a Game 7. We're going to shrink again. And the Bucks are going to come in here and beat us again. And we're going to go home again, and I'm going to cry again. Like, that's what I thought. And even, let's rewind even before this. Let's talk about the series in general, right? I'll get to the Game 7 and how I felt about it later, but this series, I picked Bucks in 7. I did, because, I'm a Celtics fan. So it makes sense, right? Now, a lot of Celtics, you could say, well, Tyler, you're a Celtics fan. Why didn't you pick the Celtics? Because I'm also a realist. I also am a truthful person, and I call it like I see it, even if it hurts. That's just how I am. That's how I'm wired. I have watched the Celtics for years, and I've watched this core grow and develop. And every year, I think that the Celtics have what it takes to win a championship. And every year, they blow it. And it got progressively worse up until this year. In 2019, without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward, we went to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals at home against LeBron James. And I talked about it earlier. We lost by 8 or whatever it was, 6 or 8. And, we shrunk in the moment. But it made sense because all of our guys were young. Jaylen Brown was still 21 years old. Jason Tatum was a rookie. Terry Rozier was 24. Marcus Smart was still only 25, 26. We had Big Al Horford as our wily veteran, but, yeah, it didn't really do much. And we didn't really have much help beyond that. We had Marcus Morris back then, but, nonetheless, our young core, our main guys, they were young. It made sense. They hadn't been there, and they were going up against the GOAT of our generation. I don't think he's the greatest of all time, but he's up there. LeBron James is a stud, so I understood it. So they blew some leads. They blew it. Fine. Then in 2020, in the playoffs against the Miami Heat, lost in 6 games. All 6 games. We were winning in the fourth quarter. All of them. And we blew it. Blew 4 of them. And then last year, we didn't even have to wait until the playoffs to blow leads. We were just blowing leads in the regular season like it was going out of style. 15-point fourth quarter lead. See ya. 25-point third quarter lead. See ya. 20-point second quarter lead. See ya. They were just blowing leads like they were going out of style. And didn't have to wait till the playoffs. Jason Tatum dropped 50 on the Nets one game. We won a game, and then we got creamed. Cool. It just got worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, at the beginning of this season, it was the worst I'd ever seen. They were blowing leads every night. Blowing leads every single night. And it was just so depressing to watch. I have never been more upset at a team and then fallen so in love with a team immediately afterwards than I have with this year's Celtics. And I think that most Celtics fans feel that way. It's because this year was so infuriating because it's yeah, listen. Our core is still pretty young. Tatum and Brown are 25 and 24 years old, respectively. They're still so young. They haven't even hit their prime yet, which is scary, by the way. But, Marcus Smart, how much longer can he do what he's doing on the defensive end? Defense and effort doesn't fade as quickly as, offensive skill and athleticism. But there's going to be a point where Marcus Smart hits that age where he can't defend everybody. Right now, he can still defend pretty much everybody. But at some point, he's not going to. And it started to look like last year, Marcus Smart was losing a step. And this year, he was, at the beginning, he was losing a step. Now, obviously, he hasn't. He won Defensive Player of the Year. So he hasn't lost a step at all. But it's starting to kind of feel that way. So, yeah, they're young, but we got Big Al back, but he's 35. Rob Williams, he needs to develop, right now, we don't have time. We don't have a lot of time. Because there are juggernauts that are being developed all across the league, and there will be future ones to come. So, how much time does this core have to win a championship? Not very long, as far as I'm concerned. So, then the Celtics start turning it around. And, they have the best defense in the league. They're basically the best team in basketball over the last half of the season. Dispatched the Nets with, not ease. There was a lot of anxiety to it. But relative ease, it was a sweep. There wasn't a ton of drama in terms of the series. Not like this last one with the Bucks, of course. But then, all the talk starts coming in. Oh, look at Kevin Durant. I thought he was the best player in the world, but he's not. because he went up against the Celtics defense and they put him in his place. Made you feel good as a Celtics fan. Made you feel like this team was special. Then Giannis knocked on your door and you took too long to answer it, and so he kicked it down and said, "I have arrived," in his beautiful Greek accent that scares me every time he speaks at a press conference after he's destroyed us. He kicked the door in and broke record after record after record after record in terms of statistics in one series. The man is a Terminator. Anybody who says that Giannis is not the best player in the world right now is nuts. And I tweeted at Skip Bayless why I thought that the Celtics would win this series, and I know he's never going to look at it because he's Skip Bayless, but Skip, you also continue to say that Giannis isn't the best player in the world despite everything telling you otherwise. You think that Giannis shrunk in Game 7? He put up 25, 13, and 7. That's not shrinking. Like, yeah, he didn't have the best game in the world in Game 7. But newsflash, we won by like 25. Even if he put up 40 points, they still would have lost. So, shut up. That's how I feel about it. He's the best player in the world, and anybody who thinks he isn't is crazy. Who's better than him? I didn't think so. There's nobody that's better than him. If you're going to eliminate Kevin Durant from the equation, there's nobody better than Giannis right now. Yeah, Jokic won MVP. Joel Embiid is great. Neither of those guys are as complete of a player as Giannis is. Neither of them. Because Jokic doesn't have it defensively, and Embiid is not a playmaker. And Embiid is both of those, or excuse me, Giannis is both of those things. Now, Giannis isn't a great shooter, but he doesn't need to be, because he's just that dominant in everything else. So, anyways, nonetheless, Giannis comes into town, and he strikes fear into the hearts of men. You know, the Greek freak took my heart away, took my soul away, especially in Game 5. In Game 5, all of the 3, 4, whatever it's been years of watching the Celtics progressively get less and less mentally tough as games wore on, all of that fear, all of that pain came back to me. And I said, why did I even bother buying in? Because it's the same story. Yeah, it took them longer to do it, and they're doing it less, but they're still doing it. And they're going to do it just enough to lose their season. Because they were up by 14 in the fourth quarter in Game 5 and blew it, and I went, here they are. The Celtics show up again, and what really got me was the fact that they didn't even get a shot off in the last 15 seconds of the game because Marcus Smart curled up like a shrimp and Drew Holiday abused him for the last 15 seconds of the game. Abused him. And Marcus Smart does not shrink like that. And when I saw that, I went, they've given up. The Bucks have stolen their soul. Because quite frankly, let's be honest. As much as I hate when Marcus Smart says it in public, because I just think it's egotistical, Marcus Smart is the heart and soul of the Celtics. He is. He always has been. He always will be as long as he's there. And as long as he's performing defensively the way he is. He always will be. And when your heart and soul curls up like a shrimp, that to me says that the team that you are playing has stolen your soul. Has stolen your will to win, and you have given up. That's what that told me. I looked at that and said the Celtics have worn out. They have given up. They have realized that they cannot stop Giannis. They cannot stop the Bucks, and we will get murdered in Game 6. That is what I thought. So I didn't watch Game 6. I didn't watch Game 6. I am a Celtics fan that had given up. I'm telling you that right now. I had zero faith in the Celtics to come out and win Game 6. There wasn't even a doubt in my mind that I was going to look at that ESPN update and it was going to be Bucks 118, Celtics 72. Like, it was going to be what the Dallas Mavericks did to the Phoenix Suns. That's what I thought it was going to be. I thought the Celtics were just going to come out there and go, please, please, just let us go home. That's what I thought. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen, and the Celtics took it to them in Milwaukee. And I went, you know what? It makes sense because all the pressure was on Milwaukee. And Jason Tatum balled out for 46. Like, he showed up. He showed up. So, I tweeted out, that night I went, why? Why didn't you just put me out of my misery? Why didn't you just put me out of my misery? I don't want to keep believing. I don't want to be reeled in because you're going to stab me in the heart like you have every year. But it didn't happen. So I went, okay, I'll bite. You reeled me in, so I'll watch Game 7, but I swear you had better win, Boston. You had better freaking win. And they went out in Game 7, and they destroyed the Milwaukee Bucks. Took them behind the woodshed, put a gun in their head, and blew it off. I mean, I don't know what else to say. They dominated the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think here is a microcosm of the difference between this series and this year versus the previous years. I talked about Terry Rozier shooting terribly. The Celtics versus the Heat in the 2020 Eastern Conference Finals shot horribly. In every playoff game that the Celtics had been in that they have struggled, in big moments, they've shot terribly. They put up a stat. In Game 7s, Jaylen Brown is averaging 11 points per game. He does not play well in Game 7s. He put up 20 in this Game 7. Or 25, whatever it was. He had a great game. And the Celtics, when the moment gets big, they chuck up a whole lot of threes and they miss them all. They take contested jumpers and they miss them all. You saw it in Game 5. They missed jumper after jumper after three after jumper after three after jumper. And they ended up blowing the lead. They just could not do anything. That's what they look like. That is what they do when they shrink. That's how you know. When the Celtics are taking 2 seconds off of the shot clock and chucking up a terrible shot and missing them every time and then giving up a layup on the other end over and over and over and over and over again, they're folding. So I thought that in Game 7, that's what was going to happen. I thought that the Celtics were going to go out there and chuck up a million threes and miss all of them and lose by 20. That's what I thought. But this year's Celtics broke the record for most three-pointers made in a Game 7 in NBA history. Wouldn't have believed you had you told me that before the game. I would have said, you're out of your mind. You are out of your mind. And I would have really said you were out of your mind if you'd have told me that Grant Williams was going to chuck up 18 threes. I would have been like, oh my God, we're dead. We're dead. Because, yeah, Grant Williams is a 40% three-point shooter. But you're going to tell me that he's going to miss 15 of them. Like, that's what I thought. And it looked like he was going to miss 15 of them in the beginning. He made his first one, and then he missed like 5 in a row. And I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. We're going to curl up like a shrimp again. But it didn't happen. Grant Williams stepped up huge. Peyton Pritchard was dancing on dudes, was dancing on Drew Holiday, who is a fantastic defender. Jason Tatum shot like 80% from the field. He only had like 25 points, but that's all he needed. Jaylen Brown played great. Marcus Smart didn't have the best shooting night in the world, but he showed up on the offensive end when we needed, got a big offensive rebound and dunk putback. He had a big three-pointer, and then the Bucks ended up calling a timeout right after that. Even Daniel Tice, he played like 5 minutes, but he had a couple of steals. He had a block on Giannis. Like, everybody stepped up versus stepping down. And I just sat there and I was moved to tears. Because this year just might be different. It's not different yet. It's not different yet. Let's talk about the Bucks. Giannis scares me more than any other player has ever scared me in my life. Save for LeBron James. Every time the Celtics have to face LeBron James in a playoff series, I get real upset because it's, 100% you're never going to have the best player on the floor. Like, that's just how it's going to go. You're not going to stop him. You're barely even going to slow him down most of the time. And that's what Giannis has done. Giannis strikes fear in you. Giannis has this never-ending motor that just will not run out. He is the Energizer Bunny. And he will just run you over and just pound you and pound you and pound you all day, all week. Doesn't matter. Until he couldn't anymore. And the strain that this series has taken on Giannis showed in Game 7. He was missing point-blank layups, even ones that he was reasonably open, at least for him, where, there was nobody in his immediate line of sight to block him or to get a hand in his face. He was missing stuff that would usually be easy for him. And when he got taken out of that game with a couple minutes left and he sat on the bench, he just looked... some people said he looked defeated, which I just think is ridiculous if anybody knows who Giannis is. He wasn't defeated. He was exhausted. He had given every ounce of himself to drag and claw a Chris Middleton-less Milwaukee Bucks team to 7 games against the best defense in basketball. And who many will say is the best team in basketball right now. What an accomplishment. Even though they didn't win the series, Giannis proved to the world that he is the man. That he is the alpha male in the NBA. To me, anyway. He proved it to me. Maybe he didn't prove it to everybody. He obviously didn't prove it to Skip Bayless, but he proved it to me. Excuse me. So he is, you just watch him and he's different. The feel of the game is different. Because if the Celtics hit a big three-pointer in that game, you sat there and went, okay, that means we're going to win this. We're going to win this possession by 1 because Giannis is going to score on the other end. You don't really do that with any other player. Even with KD, you can sit there and go, okay, now we need to stop KD. But you're not sitting there going, oh, KD is 100% going to score right now. Giannis, I literally sat there and went, okay, now let's see how many points Giannis scores on this. Is it going to be 1, 2, or 3? We'll see. And it just felt like that every single possession. The Celtics would hit a shot, and then Giannis would just drive down and score with ease. And then Milwaukee would get right back to having the momentum. And the Celtics had to work for every single possession on offense. And it felt like, oftentimes Milwaukee didn't have to work on offense, although obviously they very much did when you kind of look back at the series. But at times as a fan watching, it's like it doesn't matter because Giannis is just going to run over all 5 of your guys and dunk. So it doesn't matter. But anyways, yeah, Giannis is an animal. And I'm so relieved that I don't have to see him anymore in this series or in these playoffs. And, people wonder why so many people are picking the Celtics right now to win. And it's because they just stopped the 2 best players in the world. KD and Giannis. They're 1 and 2. Or 1A and 1B. Whatever. That's how it is. They're 1A and 1B. Let's just be honest with ourselves, okay? And the Celtics defense beat them both. So, as good as Jimmy Butler is, he's not Giannis. And he's not KD. So, I don't think the Celtics are going to have nearly as hard of a time on defense stopping the alpha on the other team than the other team. Now, here's the difference between the Heat and the Celtics. The Heat are much deeper. Or excuse me, not the Heat and the Celtics, but the Heat versus the Nets and versus the Bucks. The Heat are a lot deeper than the other 2 teams. The Brooklyn Nets had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. That was your offense. Seth Curry would hit threes sometimes. That's it. That was your offense. Nobody else really stepped up on offense consistently for you. Bruce Brown had a couple of nice games, sure. Nick Claxton had a couple of nice games, sure. Yeah, Goran Dragic had a couple of nice games, absolutely. But none of them were consistently going to step up for you. Milwaukee, you had Giannis. Sometimes you had Drew Holiday. That's pretty much it. You had, maybe a little bit from Bobby Portis sometimes. Maybe a little bit from Grayson Allen sometimes, although not really. You had Brook Lopez for a little bit in Game 7. But that's it. There's nobody else on that team without Chris Middleton that scares you on offense. Outside of Drew Holiday and outside of Giannis. But Miami? Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Victor Oladipo. All these guys are capable of going off for 20 or 30. Maybe not all of them are capable of going off for 30, but all of them are definitely capable of going off for 20 on any given night. Kyle Lowry is not the same man that he was in Toronto. Let's be honest with ourselves. He's not the same player, and he's really, really battling injuries right now. His body's wearing down on him. So, he might not be as effective, but if he can give you 12 points, that might be enough. If Jimmy gives you 29, Bam gives you 20, Hero gives you 15, Oladipo comes off the bench, gives you 10, Strus gives you 10, that's about 100 points right there. And then you sprinkle in some other guys in there, you're doing fine if that's how you're going to play. So, the Miami Heat are a much deeper team, so I'm interested to kind of see how the Celtics decide to play them. What will be nice is that there'll be a lot more straight-up one-on-one defense, and the Celtics just daring guys to beat them. Because, there's not going to be a lot of double-teaming Kevin Durant like there was in the Nets series, and there's not going to be a lot of double-teaming Giannis like there was in this series against the Bucks. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Now, what is my prediction for this series? Celtics in 6. That is my prediction. The Heat have home court advantage this series. They obviously, as they are the 1 seed, I predict that the Celtics will probably steal either Game 1 or Game 2. They'll win both games at home. They'll lose Game 5 to Miami because Jimmy Butler's a dog and they won't let him lose, but they'll go back to Boston and they'll end up winning in Boston. That's my prediction for the series. I just think that the Celtics defense is special. I mean, this defense is special. And let me tell you, if you can stop Giannis and you can stop KD, but you can't stop Jimmy Butler, I don't know what to tell you. Because the Celtics have stopped the 2 best players in the world. And they didn't necessarily stop Giannis, but they did just enough. They survived Giannis. Let's be honest, they survived Giannis. Maybe they didn't stop him. Maybe that's a poor choice of words. And you're not going to stop Jimmy Butler. But what you can do is you can stop him from making plays. You can stop him from distributing. You can stop him from getting everybody else involved. Because, quite frankly, Jimmy Butler by himself is not going to beat you if you're the Celtics. Because if Kevin Durant by himself can't beat you, and Giannis by himself can't beat you, Jimmy Butler by himself cannot beat you. That is just how that's going to work. The Heat have to rely on Tyler Hero scoring a lot and Bam scoring a lot. Now, in the series in 2020, Bam Adebayo dominated the Celtics. I mean, there was nobody underneath that could stop him. But there is now. Big Al's back. Big Al is back. We did not have Al Horford because he was playing for the 76ers that year. Al Horford is obviously getting up there in age, and he's going to need some help. But hopefully we'll have Rob Williams for a spell of 15 or 20 minutes a night. He can help stop Bam. Grant Williams, he's a much better defender than he was back in 2020. He's a much better player than he was back in 2020. He's probably, at least in my opinion, going to get the starting minutes again. Because at this point, Rob Williams is at least in my opinion, out of the starting lineup. And I hate that because I love Rob Williams. I mean, ask anybody in my family. Rob Williams is one of my favorite players in the NBA. And he has been since he got drafted. As soon as he got drafted, I said, that kid can be a stud if we play him right and if we coach him right. That kid can be a stud. He's going to give us something that we haven't had, and that's a big lob threat. And that's exactly what he's done. Exactly what he's done. And it's been amazing to watch. But, first of all, his health. He's already had one knee surgery, and that same knee is having issues again. Now, the Celtics have continuously said that there's no structural damage. He just has a bone bruise. So my guess is he will be healthy enough to play by tomorrow. He was available to play in Game 7, but I think that they wanted to give him a couple extra days rest, and they clearly didn't need him. They beat the Bucks by 25 without him. So it didn't really matter. But nonetheless, I think that Grant Williams should start. And if anything, it's because the Miami Heat, unlike the Milwaukee Bucks, who really, really will just kill you on the inside and not let you get to the rim. The Miami Heat are a great defensive team, absolutely, but they are undersized as compared to the Milwaukee Bucks. They just are. The Milwaukee Bucks have 3 7-footers on their team, and the Heat have Dwayne Dedmon, who's a good defensive big man, yes, but he's by himself. So that's it. And Bam's a good defensive player too, but he's a little bit undersized. He's an undersized center. I think he's only 6'9 or 6'10. A lot like Rob Williams, actually. But unlike Rob Williams, Bam Adebayo does not have the vertical leaping ability of Rob Williams. Now, Bam Adebayo is one of those guys that can help slow down Giannis because they're very similar body-wise. But, Bam Adebayo, he's going to have to contend with Al Horford and Grant Williams, who are your shooters. So you're getting Bam out of the paint. He's going to have to be out of the paint. And if he's not going to be out of the paint, you're going to be able to shoot the lights out all day long out of Al Horford and Grant Williams spots. That's just what's going to happen. Now, you've got a little bit better of a defensive power forward in Max Strus than you do in Milwaukee. Absolutely, because Brook Lopez or Bobby Portis was not going to be running out to the three-point line. Now, he can. But that's where Big Al's going to come in. So, I think that this is going to be a much different looking series than it did 2 years ago. The Celtics are a better team, clearly, than they were a couple of years ago. They're much more ready, and this time, they're motivated. Now, I'm not saying that they weren't motivated back then, but everybody said that they were the better team back then, and that's exactly why they lost. It's because the Miami Heat exposed a weakness in the Boston Celtics and just kept attacking them all series long. That's what they did. But this time, Celtics have in the back of their mind, these guys beat us. They're out for revenge. We are out for revenge. Celtics in 6. That is my prediction. So, my prediction. Celtics, Warriors, NBA Finals. I really hope it's not the Mavericks. I really hope it's not the Mavericks, and I obviously really hope it's not the Heat. These series could go any number of ways. The Mavericks could win in 4. The Warriors could win in 4. Either of them could win in 7. I think that the Celtics Heat is going to end in 6 unless the Miami Heat come out and just dominate in Miami, which I don't foresee. They've played well in Miami throughout the playoffs, but who did they play? They played Atlanta? And they played Philly with a broken Joel Embiid and a James Harden that didn't work. They didn't really have to prove it to me necessarily. They haven't proved it to me that they have a crazy home court advantage. At least not yet. But we will see. And again, I'm predicting Celtics in 6. And of course, as of right now, I'm going Celtics to win the finals because they're my boys. They're my boys, and I'm repping the green. I am repping the green. So anyways, that's going to do it for me, guys. That's my synopsis of the NBA playoffs. I wanted to get a big, in-depth one because, again, I didn't get to upload last week, and I really do apologize for that. It's just been crazy. But this week, I'm going to do, obviously, this, And I have the interview that you guys will have already seen if you haven't seen it. Matt Williams. It was a fantastic interview. I had a great time. Check that out. It's up on my channel as of right now. And then obviously Friday, I'm going to talk about giving updates and stuff like that for, the rest of the playoffs up till that point. I'll be recording on Thursday, so it'll be in a few days. So there will be 1 or 2 games of the conference finals that I'll talk about, and then I'll talk about some more MLB stuff. I'll talk about some NFL stuff as well. So anyways, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm on the road to 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and I will see you all next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.